ऑडिबल है ना?
हाँ सर.
Initially, I want to announce or inform the audience that our two members of Indian Water Works Association, Aurangabad Center, Dr. Parag Sadgir and Dr. Priyanand Agle, they have been granted a patent on self-purification of polluted waters. This is a very big achievement because as far as national education policy is concerned, patent in engineering college or patent by the faculty is considered as very important activity. So because of that, for long-standing work that Dr. Sadgir and Dr. Agle were doing in Aurangabad, because of that, they have filed it in 2016, but you know that it's a long process. And in 2021, after 5 years of, can say, continuous efforts and persuasion, they have been awarded the patent in self-purification of polluted waters. You will be, can say, interested to know about that, in the sense that this is a method wherein less energy, or rather no energy, is required, and that's why it's a very cost-effective, I can say, treatment for polluted water, and that's why it's a very considerable and big achievement to the Aurangabad Center. So that's why I congratulate Dr. Parag Sadgir and Dr. Priyanand Agle on behalf of all of you and on behalf of our center. Thank you.
I'm thankful to Dr. Upendra Kulkarni sir, Chairman of the Indian Water Works Association, Aurangabad Center, and all the members of the IWWA Aurangabad Center for these felicitation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Sadgir sir to brief about World Environment Day, 1 or 2 lines.
I cannot start the video because the host has stopped it. Okay. Oh, now it started. In 1972, the United Nations has, in the Stockholm Conference on Environment and the Human, they had decided to celebrate these particular World Water Day, World Environment Day, and officially they have started celebration in 1974. And in 1987, they have started rotating that center's activity or the activity of the center on the various countries. India got the opportunity 2 times in 2011, and at that time our theme was forest, nature, and your service, at your service. And in 2018, again we have got the opportunity. At that time, we have decided the theme, that is the beat plastic pollution. And this year, the Pakistan is the host, and the theme they are given is the ecological restoration as the ecosystem restoration officially. Congratulate the Aurangabad Indian Water Works Association Center for arranging this particular webinar on this particular day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now,
Rahul Agarwal, sir.
Yes, sir.
Rahul Agarwal.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Kindly announce Dr. Anil Gupta ji. He is Director Technical. He is also present. He will express his views for 1 minute.
I request sir, Anil Gupta sir
Gupta,
का
sir.
ऑडियो चालू नहीं है. One second.
उनको रिक्वेस्ट कर दो. क्या हो रहा है?
सर उनका ऑडियो अभी तक उन्होंने कनेक्ट नहीं किया है, वो ज्वाइन तो हो गए, ऑडियो कनेक्ट नहीं किया उन्होंने।
Okay, after his joining, you can give him the.
Okay, yes sir.
Okay.
Now
You continue.
I welcome today's speaker, Vihang Raj.
He has joined. Rahul, he has joined.
Yes, yes. I request Anil Gupta sir to kindly speak 2 words
On this occasion.
on this occasion. Anil sir.
Gupta sir, kindly unmute yourself and please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am puzzled with the network, right?
Yeah, yes.
Am
sir.
I audible?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Dr. P.R. Sarda, Dr. U.G. Kulkarni, Dr. P.S. Sadgir, and he is also member of my technical committee, right?
Yes.
So today we are celebrating the World Environment Day, and theme is restoration of ecosystem. World Environment Day is one of the biggest annual events organized by the United Nations. The theme for this year is ecosystem restoration. Today, UN has also launched UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. WHO has also joined UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, a mission to prevent reverse the degradation of ecosystem and diversity of life they sustain. Dear friends, we can achieve sustainable development only if environmental safeguards are adhered to. If we do any activity for development, right, then our ecosystem is gets disturbed. I give one example. When you overexploit the groundwater, what happens? So nearby ponds, river, lakes, ecosystem of these rivers, lakes, and ponds get disturbed. When overexploit the groundwater, the water level of these water bodies goes down. At one time, they dried up. Then aquatic life of these water bodies got extinct, and this ecosystem gets disturbed. So meanwhile, if you exploit the water and at the same time, if you discharge the groundwater, then a eco balance can be achieved. So if we environmental safeguards are adhered to, so we can achieve sustainable development. Let us stop harming nature. Let us stop polluting it. Let us join hands to bring a positive change to make planet Earth a much healthier, greener, and happier place to live. This can only happen if we do all together for a positive goal. So, I congratulate Aurangabad Center for organizing this day by this webinar, in which 200 speakers will deliver the lecture, and we all be benefited from them. And then I finish my and thank you.
Rahul Agarwal, please continue. Rahul, please continue.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Anil, sir. Now, I'm here to welcome our speaker, Dr. Vihang Raj Kulkarni, sir. Thank you, Vihang Raj Kulkarni, sir, for accepting our invitation. He has completed his PhD from IIT Guwahati and is currently working in IIT Silchar He has many purpose and consultancy to his credit. He is currently working on many live projects or related to waste.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Actually,
Then
I'm not able to hear you, any of you. I don't know whether it is.
We are able to hear you.
Sir, do it speaker. Move to the speaker.
Hello.
Use headphones. Vihangraj sir.
Hello, sir.
हा, तुमचा आवाज ऐकू येतोय आम्हाला.
Hello. I request Vihangraj sir to start with session. Hello.
Use headphone or make speaker. Okay.
विहंगराज, तुमचा आवाज ऐकू येतोय आम्हाला. स्क्रीन
Let
शेअर
me
करा.
check with new headphones then.
Sir, maybe he came call आया होगा उनको, so maybe the setting change.
हेडफोन का स्लॉट है इसमें? Hello. Okay, I think I am audible to you everyone, but
Yeah.
I'm not able to listen, hear it to anyone. Let me
Sir,
check with another system. I
please-
think, I don't know.
You can rejoin so that it is possible.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Acha, I'm audible now.
Yes, sir. You
Yeah,
are
yeah.
audible now.
Okay.
तो
sorry
स्क्रीन
for
शेअर
that.
करा सर.
हाँ.
वडवणे सर, नमस्कार.
Hmm. 100%.
येस, स्क्रीन शो करा.
Is it visible?
या स्क्रीन शो कर फक्त.
Hmm.
या,
Okay.
it is.
Okay.
You can start.
Sorry for the interruption. Anyway, and thank you for for inviting me to deliver lecture on this World Environment Day. at Indian Water Works Association. I thank all the dignitaries of Iowa Aurangabad local chapter for inviting me and organizing this event on the World Environment Day occasion. So today, the theme of this World Environment Day 2021 is the ecosystem restoration. That is by UNEP, that is United Nations Environment Program. So this is the theme that UNEP has chosen for the 10 years, like from 2020 to 2030. So we need to understand why this theme is chosen particularly. Like the earlier theme for the past decade was the biodiversity conservation, and for this decade, this goal or the objective of this decade is the ecosystem restoration. So why this ecosystem restoration is because now we have already witnessed the unpredicted pandemic situations. Also, we have seen various natural calamities occurring across the world. So how these things are happening, why these things are happening, we can ask ourselves, and we may end up in saying or perceiving that these are all coming from the either from the due to the climate change, and most of all the ecosystem which we live in, may it be our own earth ecosystem, or may it be a smallest like a small pond ecosystem. Right from the pond to the mother earth, we all live in the particular ecosystem, and when this ecosystem is being disturbed, then all these kinds of natural calamities, or I may not say, or I cannot say that that is the sole reason, but somewhere something could be the somewhere it could be one of the reasons that has been occurred for this such a calamities. So pollution is being one of the major cause for deterioration of any ecosystem. Like when we talk about air pollution, or we talk about the water pollution, then the water pollution, when we talk about the water pollution, the most important thing that comes to mind is the industrial pollution, because it is the highest contributor for the water pollution. And water pollution ultimately not only disturbs the water ecosystem or the lake ecosystem or the water body ecosystem, but also invariably it affects the other ecosystems as well, because due to the pollution, the bioaccumulation of pollutants may occur in the aquatic animals, and through the aquatic animals it enters into the food chain, which can be again affecting the other ecosystems. So for that purpose of for the purpose of this World Environment Day occasion or celebrations, I have chosen this topic of one of the industrial pollution industrial waste management. That is, we have selected the lead acid battery manufacturing industry, which is situated in Ahmednagar, that is in Maharashtra. So we will talk about why this industry I have selected is lead acid industry is one of the most polluting industries, maybe third in the row from the top. So it essentially being a lead, as it is being a lead acid manufacturing industry, it definitely generates the, or it definitely affects through lead pollution, and also the acid, that means the pH pollution or the low or acidic pH pollution. So we will see some literature, or we'll see not exactly literature, but we will see some of the past events, or we will see the development of the battery industry. Then we will in this we'll talk about a little talk about pollution that has been caused by these industries. Then we will see what kind of methods we use. Then we will go through the characterization, and then implication for production of clay bricks and heavy metal fixation. Finally, we will see the major findings. So as we all know, the globalization or the rapid industrialization has affected the urban water quality to a greater extent, and it not only affects the water quality. When it affects the water quality, it invariably affects the human beings as well as the ecosystem. And also the careless handling of this of the waste that has been generated from the industries is not is only worsening the situation of the water pollution. So we need to understand, we'll understand what kind of pollution sources we have for the water pollution. Those could be agricultural, domestic, airborne, and industrial. So we'll talk about the industrial sources today. And in particular, from industrial sources also, as we already discussed, we have numerous numerous industries, right? So today we will talk especially about the lead acid battery industry. Now we need to understand what exactly this lead acid battery industry, why we should talk about this. So why we should talk about this is because it creates the lead pollution. So what are the properties of lead? Lead is basically, it is considered as a heavy metal, right? So the heavy metals are of various types, like essential heavy metals, beneficial and detrimental. Essential, we can say these are the metals which are essential or useful for our body. Like in our blood, the iron content is there, right? So good amount of iron should be there in the blood. So these are the essential. There are some beneficial, that means if they are present, it is all good. If they are not present, then also we can leave our livelihood. But there is a group of pollutant, which heavy metals, which is detrimental. That means these are affecting negatively on our body or the environment. So this lead is falling in detrimental class of these heavy metals. Hence, we need to talk about it. So we'll see about the lead acid. This LAB stands for lead acid battery. And now onwards in this presentation, I will use the LAB only. So this LAB industry and heavy metal pollution, if we see in the history, so there are numerous events occurring in the history, and it all started in 18th century. Since then, the battery industry has not looked back, and it has kept on growing. Like in 1960, the 28% of the global lead produced was used in the lead acid batteries. In 99, it went to 74. In 15, it went to 85, and 2020 stat is yet to be generated, and we do expect it has to reach above 90. So this much amount of lead is used in the battery industries. So what we need to do is the recycling. However, if we see the used lead acid batteries, that is ULABs, used acid batteries means whenever we are using a battery in our vehicle, once the battery is discharged, the service person asks us to replace the battery. Many a times we recharge the battery, but now the battery is out of order and we need to recycle it. That time it is called as the used lead acid battery. So what happens to those batteries? We never give a thought on that. So these batteries are again go for recycling. And if we see the statistics, the developed countries are almost 90 to 95%. They are 90 to 100%. They are recycling the batteries. However, we are struggling to reach 60 to 70%. This 90% figure could be possible in hardly a small locality or a city. But as an average, in India, we do go for only 35 to 40% of the batteries recycling. And that is also not through the organized sector, but it is through the unorganized sectors like rag pickers and all. So there are the pollution reports of the lead, like in blood it has been found. So there are many events, like in China there was a lead poisoning. In India also there was a case of lead poisoning of the groundwater through groundwater contamination. So these are the instances of used lead acid battery heavy metal pollution. These are captured by myself, and these are somewhere in nearby Guwahati in Assam. So you can see these kind of foul practices for lead acid battery recycling they are doing. This is the molten lead, and these are the lead fumes. You can see the hall is full of lead fumes, which is very dangerous or injurious to the human health, and the workers are not even wearing any kind of safety or gloves or nothing like that. So these kind of pollution, these kind of activities only worsens the situation. So this was all about the history of the industry. But why we should talk about the history? Because it is a past. But it's not only the past, but the future of this lead acid battery is very bright, because it has to be. It is said that it will grow with the compound rate of 8%. Because why it will grow? Because of the increased automobile demand. Nowadays there is explosion in the e-bikes, like e-driven bikes or cars, right? So the future is the future of the automobile sector is in the e-bikes or e-cars. Thereafter, we have the expansion in the telecommunication sector, which also needs the battery backups. Increased number of solar projects that also needs the batteries to store, and IT industry, and the most important that we already discussed, that is the e-bikes and e-cars. So we need to see what kind of waste is being generated from the industry. That is, there are two types of waste those are generated in the industry. One is the wastewater, and another is the sludge. This sludge is the byproduct of this wastewater treatment. When this wastewater is containing lead ranging from 2 to 50 mg per liter, very high TDS and acidic pH. So in order to remove this lead, what the industry persons do, they add the lime to this wastewater. When the lime is being added to the wastewater, at the time the pH raises, and the whatever lead is present, that gets precipitated, and that forms the sludge. So the sludge is, let's suppose, and the volume of the wastewater and sludge, if we see, it reduces to 1,000 times. Maybe let's suppose there was a wastewater of 1,000 liters. 1,000 liters of wastewater may produce only 1 liter, 2 liter of liquid or dry sludge. Okay, so this much amount of so these many heavy metals are concentrated in such a small volume, so we can expect very huge concentration of the heavy metals in this, like 500 to 10,000 mg per liter mg per liter of the concentration. So if we go for the treatment of wastewater, we have various technologies, right? So chemical precipitation being most popular among the industry. And if we go for the decontamination or fixation of heavy metals in sludge, we do not have many technologies in place, or in India, we do not practice those technologies, though those most of the technologies are still in the laboratory scale, but many developed countries have already started using this technology for sludge in cemented brick production and sludge in the fired brick production. So this is the in this study we will talk about the sludge used in. So I already we have discussed that there are two types of bricks, like cemented bricks and the conventional brick, that is by the in firing. So we all know the production of this bricks has a very large carbon footprint, because the amount of energy that is being needed, because the firing temperature goes up to the 1200 or 1300 degrees Celsius. So it requires huge amount of energy, and so it has the higher carbon footprint. So the developed countries, as we already discussed, they have already started using these waste materials for their brick production, but we all are struggling still, and the studies are limited to the laboratory. So the fired brick production, essentially, this is the process. The clay minerals, silt and sand, they are fired at 1200 degrees Celsius, and it forms into the bricks, which are hard and non or less water absorbing and thermally insulated, but it results into the clay depletion. However, instead of using these clay minerals, if we add a part, or if we replace this clay with a partial replacement of any waste material which is suiting to the production of the production of the bricks, then we can save this fertile clay along with that, we can achieve many goals like heavy metal fixation, value addition to sludge, and manufacturing of thermally resistant bricks. So we have figured out a few points which were not addressed in the literature, and we found that these best available practices also lack in leaching, in stopping this heavy metal leaching from LABS, that is lead acid battery sludge. This LABS stands for lead acid battery sludge. So that is why the understanding the characteristics of this kind of sludges is found to be very important. So in today's talk, what we will discuss about is the toxicity assessment and valorization potential of LABS, that is the lead acid battery sludge. So for the purpose of study, we collected this LABS from one of the leading LAB industry, that is Exide Industries, situated in Nagar. And then we went for characterization, different characterizations of this LABS, that is laser particle size analyzer, then cation exchange capacity, moisture content, COD, all characterizations we did. There are a few more characterizations, but those are irrelevant for today's talk. Thereafter, we went for so why we go for the characterization of this waste is because like when we go to a doctor, he or she, the doctor does not directly prescribe us the medicines, but he asks us to go undergo some testing, right? So after only diagnosis, he or she or the doctor prescribes us the medicines. The same way, we tested the characteristics, or we tested, or we recognized, or we explored the characteristics of this sludge in order to propose a potential utilization of this sludge. And based on the characterization of the sludge, we went for the manufacturing of these clay bricks. So in manufacturing of these bricks, what we did was we blended this PBS, that is pulverized LABS, is termed as a PBS. That means we use this sludge and we use clay in varying percentage, like from 2.5 to 50%. That means the clay was, let's suppose if it is a 2.5%, then the 2.5% of the weight was the sludge, and 97.5% was the clay, and we increased this percentage up to 50%. Then we casted it into small laboratory scale bricks. It was air dried first for first 24 hours. Then it was oven dried for another 24 hours. Finally, it was fired at 12 hours, fired at 1200 degrees Celsius, or the varying temperatures from 500 to 1250 with 2 hours of hold time, and it was allowed to cool naturally. And in this presentation, the terminology followed will be, whenever I am saying B5, it essentially refers to bricks which are with a 5% replacement. That means 5% is sludge and 95% is clay. Thereafter, we went for testing. We went for testing of this bricks, prepared bricks, as per BIS procedure. We did heavy metal analysis in AAS, that is atomic absorption spectrometer, and same way we did it was for wastewater. The same way we did it for the sludge by using the Aquaregia digestion. So this is the pictorial view of the whole work that has been presented here. So we have this hazardous battery sludge, which if we go for, or if we allow it for improper landfilling or soil dumping, then there are two types of problems that may occur. The first one is heavy metal may leach from this sludge, and it may contaminate the groundwater. Then from the groundwater, through bioaccumulation, it may enter into the food chain and devastate the whole ecosystem. In other way, it can be, if there is no water body nearby, then it may be uptaken by the plants. So once it is uptaken by the plants will be, being a primary producer, it will be eaten by the secondary animals, and from the secondary animals, it may enter again into the food chain, and devastate the ecosystem. So this all can be stopped, or this all can be minimized if we propose, or if we recognize or identify some possible utilization of this brick without hampering the environment. So this is the way that we proposed, that is a utilization of this hazardous clay sludge into the fired clay brick production. So we found that this clay production, these fired clay bricks were complying to the BIS standards as well as the ASTM standards. Also, it gave the ductile and colored bricks that we will see in due course of time. And the most essential, that the TCLP test, that is toxicity characteristic leaching procedure, which is the procedure set by the US EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, for checking the hazardous nature, or for denoting the hazardous nature of any solid waste. So this test was carried out on this raw sludge, and it was found that this was above the allowable limits. That means it was hazardous. The same test was carried out on these bricks as well, and we found that there was no heavy metal leaching. So it essentially tells us that the heavy metals, where the heavy metals have gone, the heavy metals are there inside the brick itself. However, the heavy metals are in different forms, because there are various forms of the heavy metal which are hazardous and non-hazardous to the human beings. So we will talk about sorry. We will talk about a little. We'll talk about a little on the physicochemical and spectroscopic characteristics of the this LABS, that is sludge. So as I already depicted you why we went for the various characterizations, almost 20 characterizations we did. These are some of the characterizations that we have done. So here through XRD, we found that it was containing the basanite mineral. So this was the most important characterization that gave us idea about its possible utilization in this kind of bricks. However, this FESM and EDX mapping also showed us that these are the heavy metals like this lead, ferrous, zinc, copper, calcium. These are distributed all over the sludge. It is not concentrated to particular part. So through characterization, we found that the lead concentration was 500 mg per kg. Sorry, the allowable concentration is 500 mg per kg, whereas the original concentration in the sludge was 8,000, more than 8,000 mg per kg. So it is almost 16 times more than the allowable limit. Further, we went for the particle size distribution and metal content. This is very important conclusion of the study, that we found that the heavy metals were concentrated in the smaller fraction, and the larger fraction contained a very few amounts of heavy metals. Like here from this diagram, you can, from this figure, you can see the heavy metals were concentrated in less than 10 micron size, and coarser fraction, that is more than 75%, contain only less than 5% of the heavy metals. So this conclusion, or this finding may result into reduction in the amount to be sent, or the money to be spent on the treatment, because if we segregate this at the initial, or in the beginning itself, then we can reduce the cost. Thereafter, this is the TCLP test, that we found that this is the hazardous, how we depicted, or how we declared this as a hazardous, because of this, on the basis of this TCLP test, the allowable limit was only 5 mg per liter, whereas we found it is 4 times more, four folds, that is 20 mg per liter. So thereafter, we went for the various kinds of through BCR scheme. We found the various fractions of these heavy metals, F1, F2, F3, and F4. F4 being not harmful, or the least harmful, and F1 being the highest harmful. So we categorized F1, F2, F3, and F4 in all kinds of this in the sludge. All the heavy metals we tested for all the heavy metals, and further we went for the risk assessment indices, and we found that the risk assessment risk was highest for lead and the cadmium. These results are also coping up or in line with the results of the PCLP test. Further, we went for a few more characterizations like TGA, that is thermogravimetric analysis, because we are going it for we are going to fire it at very high temperature. We carried out this characterization, and here from this you can see from the APSM images we can see this is the clay soil, normal clay soil. It is 4,000 times, sorry, 5,000 times zoomed. This is 10,000, and this is probably 50,000 times zoomed. So here we can see the particles are very single particles are in the or the particles of the clay are scattered. Similarly, the sludge particles are also scattered. However, when it was fired at 875 degrees Celsius, the scattering of the particles was reduced, and the particles started agglomerating. When the bricks were fired at 1,000 degrees Celsius, here you can see the bricks or the clay minerals started to agglomerate, and they started vitrification and creating such a surface, or the plane surface or the hard surface, which is impermeable or less water absorbing. And when it was the temperature or the firing temperature was still further increased, and we found that the bloating phenomenon had to be occurring here. Bloating is a phenomena wherein the soil acts as a boiling water. So the soil started boiling, and whatever were the gases trapped inside, or the burning of the mineral started emitting gases, and these gases were trapped inside, and these holes, small holes, you can see as a bloating phenomenon. But this is not recommended for brick production, so we stopped it up to 1,000 degrees Celsius. So further, after once the bricks were produced, we went for its civil engineering properties, like like water absorption and loss on ignition, and we found that as we increase the PBS content, the water absorption also increased, and as we increase the PBS content, the water absorption also increased. However, with the increase in the temperature, the water absorption decreased, because here you can see the black line, which is representing 950 degrees Celsius, and 1,050, which is having the least water absorption. This is very obvious that whenever there is a higher temperature, there will be more glossy surfaces and less will be the absorption. Further, we went for various properties such as apparent porosity, bulk density, which are important as a civil engineering aspects, and we found that it was complying to the standards. Finally, we went for the failure pattern of this fired clay bricks, and we found that here we can see the B5, that is the 5% replacement bricks and 30% replacement bricks. Here you can see the B5 brick strength, but in all times the strength was complying to the Indian BIS, that is Bureau of Indian Standards. But here the interesting part to know is, here we can see the catastrophic failure. The graph is rising, and it is suddenly falling down. That depicts, or that represents, the catastrophic failure of the bricks. Whereas if we see this graph, the failure is not catastrophic. So this property, because this property is gained due to the addition of this sludge. So this property may help in building the earthquake, but building structures into the earthquake-prone areas wherein we want to avoid the catastrophic failure, and we may be able to stop or reduce the life loss. So these were the bricks. These are the bricks that we casted through using this sludge. These are the from brick B5 to B30. Here you can, and right from 930 degree to 1050 degree Celsius. Here we can see there are various shades of this brick. So nobody will be willing to use these kind of blackened bricks because they don't see or they don't look beautiful. Although we go for plastering, these bricks are not recommended. Also, in order to get more and more water absorption. So these kind of bricks can be used for the beautification. Here you can see B30 at 1050 degrees Celsius. Here we can see the brick is in yellow color. So why this color? Basically, the color to this bricks is due to the brick. Essentially, the clay has the ferrous minerals. That is the reason it is red in color after firing. But when sludge was added up to 30%, the sludge was containing CaO. Right? So this red color is due to Fe2O3 to Fe2O4, and this yellow color was due to the calcium oxide. This is the higher content of CaO. Because of the CaO content, at the time of firing, it turned into yellow brick. So this we can use as an advantage, because such kind of yellow bricks can be used for the beautification purpose, and it can be used to earn money or generate the revenue. Finally, we went for the compressive strength of the fire bricks, and we found that the bricks were complying in terms of the compressive strength, and they not only complied with the BIS standard but also the ASTM standards. The most important consideration was the environmental consideration, because why we started all these things, because of the hazardous nature of the sludge. So at the end, we must check whether the hazardous nature of this sludge is been reduced or eradicated or not. So for that purpose, we carried out the same test, that is the TCLP test, for all the brick variations or all the brick compositions, like starting from B0 up to B30. Also B40 also we calculated. Although B50 was not because of the water absorption, that was found to be the limiting criteria. We did not consider B50 anyway, but we carried out for B40 up to B40, and we found that none of the combination was exceeding the allowable limits. Here you can see this is for the raw sludge, 20 mg per liter. The allowable limit is for lead, it is 5 mg per liter, and the raw sludge was having 20 mg per liter, and none of the brick that we casted or prepared was reaching more than 5 mg per liter. So this depicted that the bricks are 100% safe for the construction purpose through the eye of environmental engineer. Right. So finally, we found that we merged the both criteria. That is these are two criteria for the brick quality as per BIS standards. That is the minimum compressive strength and maximum water absorption. And we found that the bricks were complying to all bricks complied in terms of the compressive strength, but bricks which were above B30, that is 30%, more than 30%, they did not comply with the maximum water absorption, and the water absorption was found to be more in those cases. That's why we discarded B30 and above B30 and B40 and above percentage variations. So through this, we have published some papers. So major findings, we can understand, we already discussed this TCLP test have already categorized as a hazardous sludge. And if we use this into the bricks, then we can make these heavy metals as stable heavy metals, and you earn or generate some revenue, or the valorization of this heavy metal sludge. Also, one of the important finding of this research was heavy metals concentration according to the size of the sludge. The finer fraction contain the highest heavy metals, and the coarser fraction contain only less than 5% of the heavy metals. So we can see, we can definitely, every research has its own limitations, and we found that we did not consider release of toxic gases when the bricks were fired. So that way we can construct some assembly in order to collect the gas, and we can test for those gases whether the NOx are produced. Again, if they are produced, again that is a hampering issue, or that could be a limiting issue, or limiting for this technology transfer, right? So, and also the bricks were fired in the laboratory in the controlled atmosphere. So we can try this in the we must try this into real kilns. So I acknowledge this for allowing me to present my work, and I thank AIWA Aurangabad Local Chapter Maharashtra for giving me opportunity to present my work before you all. Thank you. I would like to, I would be happy if I could take some questions. Over to you.
Rahul sir. Hello, Rahul sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh,
Okay.
next phone introduction करना है.
Rashmita ma'am.
Okay. Continue.
Hello, Rashmita ma'am.
Yes, yes, Rahul. Am I audible, Rahul?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Vingraj sir, because your presentation was really informative. Actually, my thesis also work is in lead removal efficiency, so I could correlate to your research part. It was really, I mean, informative session, and thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to welcome the other speaker, that is Mr. Rohan Kale. Sir has completed his diploma. Hello. He's completed his diploma in human resources. He has experience as a manager, talent acquisition in HR department at Sun Pharma corporate office at Mumbai. From last 3 years, he has been working on exploring step wells in Maharashtra, major part of Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Goa. So he has explored more than 300 step wells and still exploring more. So we are eagerly waiting, sir, to listen from you regarding your expertise. So I welcome you, sir, and I would like to continue the session.
Okay. Is my voice audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. First of all, thanks to Indian Water Works Association, Aurangabad, Dr. Parag Sadgir sir and Dr. Upendra Kulkarni sir for giving me an opportunity to present the Maharashtra Step Wells campaign on the occasion of World Environment Day. Yeah. I'm not able to start the video part. So can you give me an access to the video?
Rahul sir.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks a lot. I'll share the screen as well. Yeah. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. One of the areas of knowledge that India excelled in the past was to build efficient water management systems. The historic water conservation and supply systems in the arid regions of India are testimony to this fact. And step wells is undoubtedly one such system which served the water requirements of people for centuries, for their domestic purpose, for bathing or drinking, and even for irrigation. with the changed notions of development, many of such scaffolds became redundant and are no longer in use. Hardly few of them are in use presently. As we got access to tap water, then we forgot the importance of scaffolds, and they are lying in the state of misery today. And the main aim for this Maharashtra scaffolds campaign is to revive the scaffolds, which can be an excellent water source for drinking, domestic purpose, and irrigation. Now I'll tell you what was the trigger point, why I started this Maharashtra scaffolds campaign. As Madam said, that yes, I was earlier associated with Sun Pharma, and for my job-related work, I used to travel to Gujarat often. And in Gujarat, I saw numerous scaffolds, and the scaffolds in Gujarat are quite actually fantastic. There's like a huge scaffolds of 5-storied, 6-storied, 7-storied. I started liking towards scaffolds basically from Gujarat. Then while in Mumbai, me and one of my friends, Manoj, we both are travelers and trekkers. We used to travel in different parts of Maharashtra for exploring scaffolds. We found the scaffolds in a very neglected state of mind, very neglected state. And then we decided that just coming back, posting blogs on Facebook would not help. Many people are doing the same thing, but this is not actually serving the purpose. Then what should we do to actually revive the scaffolds? Are we taking some constructive steps? And then we decided to launch this Maharashtra scaffolds campaign. So my vision, I will first of all tell you, the vision would be to revive all the scaffolds in Maharashtra, heritage conservation, the study of the ancient trade routes, because the scaffolds were built in the ancient times or even during the medieval times on the trade routes, and then celebrating Maharashtra Scaffold Mahotsav, Scaffold Festival. So for this vision, I have jotted down some points. And for this vision to become successful, it was not possible basically to stay in Mumbai and then achieve what I wanted to. So I left my job in March 2020. And then I decided to travel across Maharashtra. But then due to sudden lockdown all across India, I could not travel across Maharashtra. I waited for the right time from October 2020 till March 2021. I traveled across Maharashtra on my bike. I covered approx about 14,000 kilometers. I personally explored 400 plus scaffolds, and I met all the heritage explorers, the researchers, the historians of those particular areas, different regions of Maharashtra, explained to them about what this campaign is, and then gathered huge support from their side. Then like what would be the goals for this scaffold campaign? Now, first of all, I would just like to brief about like which all classifications we are covering under Maharashtra Scaffolds campaign. In scaffolds, so in regional language, they are often referred to as Barau. In Paschim Maharashtra, some part of Marathwada and North Maharashtra. If you go towards the Vidarbha side, they are commonly referred to as Baudi or Bauli over there. And Aurangabad also has the influence of this Mughals, so they have ruled over there, so they commonly refer to them as Baudi. In Konkan side, it is commonly referred to as Ghodbao or say Pandavkalin Vihir. So though I am not sure who has built those scaffolds, but they refer to as Pandavkalin Vihir. Then we are also covering Kund, Pushkarni, Pokhran, and helical scaffolds, and the other is the step tanks. So helical scaffolds are basically round wells with steps from the inside leading to the well shaft in the spiral format. So these are the few classifications of scaffolds which we'll be covering under Maharashtra Scaffolds campaign. As I said, this is the vision which I first planned, jotted it down. And to hit the vision, I had to make some goals, because unless until the goals, I set some goals, the vision will not be achieved. So what will be the goals is that mapping numerous thousands of scaffolds exact GPS coordinates on Google Maps. Then, yes, apart from mapping, the next step will be documentation. The documentation will happen on 4 sides. One will be the heritage documentation, that is the Indologist and Historians Club. It will be the heritage document. documentation. One will be the photographic documentation, including the drone shots. One will be the that is architectural documentation. And the fourth aspect would be the written documentation in a standardized format across Maharashtra. So as of now, if you read any blogs or something on Facebook, people write at least like 100 lines, 150 lines blogs. This is not solving the purpose. We will not be able to understand how many step files are there and which classification, which shapes, and whatever analysis or research we want to do, we have to have some Maharashtra centralized database. Okay. So apart from this documentation part, we will next move to the cleanliness drives. The cleanliness drives will take part on the there will be two sides of the cleanliness drives. One will be the basic cleanliness drives, like removing some waste which is there, some mud which is lying on the steps. Apart from that, there will be this well shaft cleaning, which some NGOs can take the initiative. They can adopt few step wells and they can work on those step wells as a project work and then revive those step wells. And the geologists can play an important role and tell us whether this water, by testing them in laboratories, whether this water can be consumed for drinking or for bathing or for some domestic purpose or for irrigation. So these are some sections on which this Maharashtra Step Wells campaign is based. We want the active participation of each and every section. So what I'm presently doing is that I am telling everyone that we are going to work forward as one common team, Team Maharashtra, and then we will be dividing our responsibilities as per this sections. That there will be a huge team of architects. I have already approached the architectural colleges for it, and they have given the support for this campaign. I am also in touch with some conservation architects. I mean, I have already discussed this project with the state archaeology department, and this project will be run under their guidance, yes, and in close collaboration with them. So the state archaeology team is also supporting this project. We have also touched base with Indologists from quite a few institutes as well as some individual contributors, and they have shown their support. Local historians, as I said, I travel different parts of Maharashtra. I have already spoken with them. We have received support from them. Cleanliness drives, I have spoken with some Durga Samvardhan Samstha. I have presently the support of 5 different huge Durga Samvardhan Samsthas, and they have a huge volunteer team. So we want to discuss with them post this rainy season as to how to start with the cleanliness drives, basically of the step wells. Then some local photographers I'm in touch with for capturing good photographs of the step wells. And yes, the main drone photographs, we need to identify who all people are there who have drone and in which parts of Maharashtra, and then ask them to capture the drone shots, and with the required police permission and with the required archaeology team permission, we will be conducting this activity. Geologists have already touched base with a few geologists from Pune side, and let's see how the progress is, and we would be requiring a team of geologists as well. Print and social media play a very important part, because to promote the step wells from all the sections, we need active support from the print media as well as the social media platforms as well. As I said, I traveled across Maharashtra. This is how I have actually traveled across Maharashtra. I remember I had went to Konkan side. I traveled Raigad, Ratnagiri. For some parts I traveled to, for 4 days I traveled to Goa as well. Then again I traveled to Kolhapur, Satara, Sangli, Pune. What I was doing is that I was traveling for 20 to 22 days at a stretch. And then I used to come back for 10 days, again travel to Vidarbha, Marathwada for 22 days. So this is how I have actually traveled. And initially there were approximately 150 to 200 people across Maharashtra who have helped me a lot basically. Without their active participation, this campaign would not be possible to set up. It would have been very difficult for this campaign to set up, because these are the people who allowed me to stay at their homes, gave me food, whenever I used to travel to the respective regions, they first of all used to ask me very politely, like, how is your journey going on? Is it going on fine? Are you facing any trouble? If as just let us know whatever help you require from our side, we will do it. So this is how like initially those 150, 200 people in 7 months, just 7 months, we have mapped 1,000 stepwells across Maharashtra from October 2020 when we launched this project to 13th April on the day of Gudi Padwa. So I'm telling people, see, if only 200 people can come together and map 1,000 stepwells, what will happen when entire Maharashtra will stand as one team? So I'm planning to bring together the entire Maharashtra together. So common locations of stepwells. Where are stepwells located, or where were stepwells built earlier? The stepwells were built on the trade routes, Vyapari Marga. As old as Satavahana period or earlier to that, we find stepwells. Ancient times, medieval times. Yeah, then Ghatwata is there. Mountain passes. There are numerous mountains and almost the Konkan side, that is Satara to Kolhapur, what we call as Desh. So I will tell this in Marathi language. That is, देशातून जर कोकणात जायचं असेल तर त्याला घाटवाटा आहे. There are numerous Ghatwata mountain passes on the Ahmednagar side and Nashik side. Mahamargs. The old Mahamargs were, the stepwells were built on the Mahamargs and thus now are called as state highways or national highways. You will find numerous stepwells in the areas surrounded by like Jyotirlinga temples, Ashtavinayak temples, Shiv temples, Hemadpanthi mandirs, local Gram Daivat mandirs, Samadhis, Vadas, Yatra routes. Like for an example, I'll give you. Shikhar Shingnapur. There's a Yatra route. There are 4 ways coming to Shikhar Shingnapur from all the sides. We have screened all those 4 sides. We located 7 stepwells over there. And the 7 stepwells are quite a big and huge in size, and not like small, almost like 20-25 feet. Then this hill, land, coastal forts and sea forts. Yes, you will find numerous stepwells over there. Every village must be having at least one stepwell of its own. And there's grot areas where there's scarcity of water, mostly in Marathwada, Vidarbha side, you will find huge stepwells. In Marathwada, there are stepwells as huge as 3-storied, 5-storied each. So this is the exact mapping of stepwells what I've done. So what I've done is that Google gives us an option of creating a My Map. So I've created this My Map and we have pinpointed, that is captured the geo coordinates and mapped the exact locations of stepwells on Google Maps. And if you visit my site, www.indianstepwells.com, go in the subsection Maharashtra stepwells, there just scroll down, you will find this map. So the square box which I've highlighted in red, you just have to click there. This is a expand button. Once you click there, there is an entire 1,170 stepwells at present will get saved in your respective Google Maps. Out of this 1,170 stepwells, we have managed to provide photographs of 630 locations. Remaining the stepwell locations, we wanted to provide the photographs, but as we are stuck up in lockdown, we are not able to venture out. So if you click on any one of the stepwells, to the exact location. You do not have. The main reason for doing so is that whenever I have a structure which is underground, it is not able. Yeah. Hello. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, yes. You continue.
Okay. Okay. Fine. So it was not basically possible to locate stepwell even from a short distance of say 10-15 meters. Unless and until we go there, only then we will be able to see what kind of huge structure it is there underground. So me and Manoj discussed earlier that, see, the way we have searched for stepwells and for 2 to 3 years, and if we do the same with people, like just give them villages, it will be a waste of their valuable time. And as we are trying to generate interest of different age groups of people, there will be many people going in with their families, with their kids. They do not, we do not want them to spend time unnecessarily, waste their time and lose interest in those stepwells. Rather than we will give them the exact locations, and this is how the mapping process started. So this is the main unique feature of this map is that once you perform this process, all the stepwell locations get saved in your Google Maps, and every time I update any new stepwell in from my side, it automatically gets updated in your respective maps. You do not have to visit my website over and over again. Like there are many of my friends who started doing this when I had mapped just 150 or 200 stepwells. All of them in the Google Maps, they are reflecting like 1,100 stepwells in all their respective Google Maps. So these are some stepwells which I visited in Konkan side. Konkan, there is Zamba Dagad, what they call as in local language Chira Dagad basically. So if you see the second stepwell or the third stepwell, these are carved out of that stone. Basically, the steps and even the well shaft is carved out from the stone. Even this first stepwell is from Madeghat area. Again, yes, as I said, mountain pass, Madeghat. The route from Madeghat is where you come a mountain pass, and on the downside it is Mahad side. Madeghat is Ranwadi, Kurd, the villages, and the taluka is Mahad. So, and the fourth one, this is a temple stepwell, basically a cone type or some Pushkani or cone. That classification we will do later as on when we start documenting. So, this are few stepwells in Konkan. These are stepwells in Paschim Maharashtra. In Paschim Maharashtra, I mean Pune, Ahmednagar side. And Dakshin Maharashtra is Satara, Kolhapur, Sangli, and Solapur. So these are the few stepwells built there, and they're like beautiful stepwells. So every time people, what used to happen is that whenever we used to talk about stepwells, people first used to say, "Oh, Gujarat or Rajasthan, kya? Chalo udhar jate hain stepwells dekhne." But this is not something which should happen. My love for stepwells started from Gujarat because no one showed me those amazing stepwells here in Maharashtra itself. But I promise to the next generation is that give us some time, 5 years, 10 years down the line, your love for stepwells will start from Maharashtra. We are trying to build up that project up to that level where you will find thousands of stepwells photos in your respective Google Maps in just one click. All the documentation will be available in just one click. Your love for stepwells will surely start from Maharashtra. So these are stepwells in North Maharashtra. North Maharashtra is Nashik, Dhule, Jalgaon, and Nandurbar. Here, if you see, there were many rich people, or even the Holkars have ruled the North Maharashtra side. So you will find numerous stepwells over there, in thousands, plenty of them. And this again, the stepwells, few of them are like 3-storied, even 5-storied stepwells are there. This the red built up stepwells, if you see on the last side where I'm highlighting my arrow, is that this is a Z-shaped stepwell, very unique. The entrance is from this side. You go there down, and again the stepwell shaft is on this side. It is a Z-shaped size stepwell. So unless and until we capture the drone shot, not any camera can capture this stepwell. We have to use drone shot over there. Now this stepwell here is the Virgaon stepwell. Virgaon is in Akole Taluka. I remember I had gone on my bike. This is basically a mountain pass connecting two villages, and the distance must be approximately about 10 kilometers from each other. And this stepwell is built on that mountain pass. Even my bike, I had to balance my bike very cautiously, otherwise I would have slipped over there. This stepwell is Pemgiri Fort. At the base of Pemgiri Fort, this is L-shaped stepwell. This again is a L-shaped stepwell at Nashik, Nifad side. This is a stepwell a few kilometers away ahead of Trambakeshwar, Amboli stepwell. This again is Akole Taluka stepwell. I'm not remembering. I think so. This is a Virgaon. This is Virgaon stepwell, and I think this is Akole Taluka only. But I'm not remembering the place name. I think Kumbefad. Kumbhe, this must be the Kumbhe step well. The step wells in Marathwada, the most, I would say, the step wells which I found very unique, very huge in size and very clean also. Many of them are in Marathwada, I would say. Marathwada was ruled by the Yadavas in the 12th and 13th century. So you will find many step wells being built in the Yadava dynasty. Like this step well, I confirmed with the local people over there. There's a step well like from the entrance from 3 sides and a mandap on the 4th side. So they said very confidently that this is Yadava Kalin step well. This is Charthana step well. This is the Pingli step well. There's an ancient Pingleshwar Mahadev Mandir, and this is a step well just in front of them. This is the Nagnath Mandir. So I will give you a classic example of this step well, particular Nagnath Mandir step well at Hatnur village in Parbhani. This step well was almost like on verge of being lost. All steps were almost out and almost in a dilapidated state. The villagers came together, they self-funded this project. They collectively collected approximately 20 to 25 lakhs for this. They did not use any government funds and they reconstructed the step well with the cost of 20 to 25 lakhs. Amazing step. This is Nagnath Mandir and hats off to their efforts basically. This is the Shambhunath Mahadev Mandir in Hingoli, Basmat area. A small step well, but I like the strong built. It is a very strong built up and the design is also unique. These are the Vidarbha step wells. Now this step well is almost a 3-storied step well. This is the Mahimapur step well in Amravati. This is a 5-storied step well. 5 layers basically. 5 layers of landings. This again, you can see the water level is very high, but this is almost 3 layers of landings. It is quite deep actually. This is the Pinjar step well. Yes, Pinjar step well, and this is the Barshi Takri step well. Again, as I said, the step wells in Marathwada and Vidarbha are quite amazing. I would request or I would suggest people like before going to Gujarat or Rajasthan, yes, definitely the step wells are quite good. I'm not denying it. But yes, do visit step wells in Marathwada and Vidarbha. You will fall in love with the step wells and the architectural designs. Now, this is what we are actually planning to do. This is village to village mapping of step wells. So I have this list of 42,000 villages across Maharashtra, which I have divided into district, taluka and village. And all 1,170 step wells are being updated in front of this, like every village. So going forward, we will be setting up teams at every taluka. Say every taluka will be having 2 to 3 coordinators with whom we will be coordinating. And every village, we need to identify at least 2 or 3 people in every village. So the classic example I can give you is that if suppose I locate any step well in Amravati, then Rohan has to go all the way to Amravati, which is a distance of say 400 kilometers. If I have a taluka coordinator over there, the distance comes down to 50 kilometers. But if I have a village to village person over there, my work becomes very easier. That is like, I just give a call to that village person and say that there's a step well just 500 meters or just a kilometer away from you. Just go there, confirm whether it is a step well or not. If yes, send me a photograph, I will map it from here. So going forward, a vision of 5 to 10 years down the line, we will be having contact persons from all the villages, the taluka coordinators. So just imagine the type of data, the type of mapping we will be having 5 years down the line. My estimate is approx about in between 5,000 to 10,000 step wells we will be able to map in the next 5 years. So on basis of this village to village mapping, if anyone asks me that how many villages have we covered in one taluka, I can just click. I have already made a pivot table. I just have to refresh that table. I will easily be able to come to know. Suppose I will give you an example, Karad taluka. I easily tell, like, out of 220 villages in Karad, we have already screened 9 villages. We have located 16 step wells. That means there is still scope to find step wells in the remaining 211 villages. So what I'm playing is that I'm creating a strong database management as well. It is not just mapping, it is a strong database management as well. Yes. So whatever research analysis we want to do, and we want to crack the progress of this project as well. Continuous tracking will help us grow, and furthermore, and that is take the next step, basically, move in the right direction. So for this village to village mapping, what I've done is that I've circulated a form, basically a Google form, telling people to just fill in this basic details like your district, taluka, village, the name, your name and your contact number, and if possible, your email ID. And just in one click, entire data comes to me, and I update this village to village mapping sheet from my side. And I also tell them that further send it to your friends from your specific taluka. Now, this is why standardized documentation checklist is important. These are blogs of two of my friends, one from Vidarbha and one from Pune side. They have written almost like a 50 to 100 pages blog lines, basically. So it is very difficult to compare what they actually mean. So what I've suggested everyone is that we will create standardized documentation checklist. Before we do that, we will be defining what we call as classifications. Now, as I said, step well. In some part, they call it as Bharau. In some parts, even they call it as a Vihir, basically. In some part, it is called Pandav Kalin Vihir. But how to recognize if that is a step well or not? For example, if there is a one-side entrance step well close to a mandir, close to a temple, then what we will call it? We will call it as Bharau, we will call it Pushkarni, what exactly? So what I'm planning to do is that the top institutes like Indology, archaeology, and where ancient Indian culture is being taught. There are some 7 to 8 reputed institutes in Maharashtra. I've already spoken with their faculty. I've spoken with the state archaeology department as well. We will also be speaking with the state gazetteer head as well. All these people, if they come together along with few senior Indologists, then we will be able to classify each and every stepwell classification. That is how to identify a Bharau, how to identify a Kund, how to identify Pushkarni, and so on. So basis, then we will start with the documentation part. So this is what I mean with the standardized checklist documentation. Like what is the stepwell name, the village, taluka, district, the date of documentation, the GPS coordinates, is the photography documentation done or not, is the drone shot taken or not. This is just a sample format. We will freeze it later. So this is the classification, like what we call it as Bharau, Kund or something, the number of entrances, the stepwell shape, the stepwell built up, the condition of stepwell, the number of floors or landing, layers of landing, the number of steps, well shaft, pulleys, arcs, idols, if there are any idols, if there are any carvings, if there is any Shilalik, that is inscriptions. On the basis of Shilalik, we will be able to identify this stepwell was built in which dynasty and in which century. Then construction period, yes, definitely. Who has built the stepwell? Is this private property or open land? How is the condition of water? Like, was it more dirty or was it clean? And if the water is being used by villagers. Like once when I traveled to Pune side, I found approximately some 10 to 12 stepwells where the villagers confirm that this stepwell water is being used for irrigation and is served something around 7 to 10 to even somewhere it was serving even to 25 acres of land. Then is there any nearby river? So what I mean by the checklist documenting in this format is that entire this data will then be converted into an Excel sheet, so that whatever analysis and research we want to do, we can do it in just one click or directly by creating a pivot table. Suppose 5 years down the line, if we have documented, for example, say 200, 300 stepwells, or say 20 years down the line, when we have documented a good amount of 1,000 to 1,000 stepwells, then just one click, we can tell how many Bharau was there, how many Pushkarnis are there, which was the oldest dynasty which has built the stepwell, what is the shape, and etc. etc. So this is what I'm planning for the database documentation, basically. Like entire Maharashtra stepwells documentation will be collated under one common format. And this is how the future of this stepwell, Google Maps stepwell will look like. In just one click, you will be able to see the photo as well as the different parameters for the stepwell, like how many entrances are there. As of now, we have not started with the documentation side, but so this is blank. But just imagine, just one click, you will be able to understand whatever documentation you, whatever information you need about the stepwells. And here, if you see one of one, basically a slide show will start. Like one of one will be like one of two, wherein photographs from different angles will be captured, the drone shots will be captured, images of the architectural documentation will be put up, the heritage documentation will be done, will be converted into a JPEG format and will be uploaded there. So it will be an end-to-end document, basically, end-to-end docket, basically. And we will confidently be able to say that, yes, this stepwell is documented end-to-end. This is architectural document. Why architectural documentation is necessary is that I will give you a classic example. This is a stepwell at Gudsai village in Satara district, and this stepwell is at Basegao village in Jalna district. The distance between Satara and Jalna is quite a bit, but they're like so two very similar types of stepwells. Almost 85% similarity is there. Now the Satara district, the well shaft is completely dilapidated. There's nothing left. But here, the well shaft is completely intact. So what I'm meaning to say is that we will be able to identify similar types of stepwells basis the photographs, drone shots, and then we will be able to do architectural documentation of all those stepwells which are currently in intact condition, so that whenever the funding comes for the dilapidated stepwells, we will be easily be to reconstruct them. Maybe 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, or even 50 years down the line, we will be able to reconstruct those stepwells in the original manner. These are the different sections which are needed for this, and have already started to build up a database for each of them. That is mapping team, which is my team. I will be leading, I will not say leading, but I will be an active part of the mapping team, and I will be doing the coordination with all my team members. And the written documentation team will also identify someone from the mapping team who is good in observation and whose articulation is also good. Architectural documentation, we have also started discussing with the architectural colleges. Some 3 to 4 architectural colleges have given support for this campaign. Then conservation architects, again, some few good conservation architects I'm in touch with. They are also ready for this campaign. So what I'm meant to say is that I've already started collecting a huge database of all these people in different talukas and districts. So there will be one functional team of, say, for example, architects. So architects across 36 districts of Maharashtra will be the functional team. And this 12 sections will be the cross-functional team for specific talukas district. We all need to work in close coordination to make it possible. This is the cleanliness drives. Like on the left hand side, if you see the stepwell, when I've been there to Nigdi. Nigdi is a village in Karar Taluka of Satara. There are 6 stepwells. Yes, 6 stepwells in just a kilometer area of that village. When we were surprised why 6 stepwells are there, later we came to know that there was a vada of Chiknis vada over there, and that is the reason 6 stepwells are there. And on the right hand side, this stepwell is at Sondara, that is Aurangabad district. The locals came forward and cleaned the stepwell. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to build that necessary awareness in people, where people, the localites only, come forward and clean their stepwells. Because unless and until that happens, it is not possible for an NGO to always come there and clean. It is the responsibility of each and every person staying there to come forward to clean their stepwells and to conserve their rich heritage. This is some stepwells were cleaned by the Durga Samvardhan Samstha. What Durga Veer Pratishthan is there, which is a huge folk conservation team, and they have taken an additional responsibility of doing stepwell conservation as well. And Bar Raigad Parivar, again a huge fort conservation team, which both have good amount of volunteers in that team. And as I said, they are doing fort conservation at present, but they have taken an additional responsibility going forward of doing the other stepwell conservation as well. And I'm happy to have their support as well for this campaign. Along with this too, there are other three different Durga Samvardhan Sanstha who have given support from their side. Now, what is the process of cleanliness drives as per the state archaeology team that we need to understand? So, as I said, for every section, we will be creating the processes, the parameters, and the frameworks under which each section will operate. Now, the NGOs mostly do have the knowledge, but there might be some local people when they come forward to clean the stepwells, and if they find any coins or say idols in the well shaft or something, and that this property belongs to the state government. So what are there any process or any parameters, or if training can be given to the locals, is what we need to understand and then discuss with the state archaeology team. This process will be done under their guidance. Then GSDA, Groundwater Survey Development Agency, have discussed with them initially. They stated that they will give their support whenever needed. So that was just an initial discussion. Further discussion needs to be done with them. And other senior geologists, they can play a very important role in defining how this section of geologist can work, basically, for doing the water analysis and the related discussions. Yes, there's definitely, we have already passed on some data of Aurangabad stepwells to NGO over there, and they've said that they will be taking up the cleaning of the stepwells. So that, see, I basically believe that I do not want my name to come up. Even if they are willing to take up the responsibility and do it for themselves, I'm fine with it. As far as the purpose, as far as the end result is achieved, what that is reviving stepwells, I do not mind. This is the study of ancient trade routes. Like mapping the exact stepwells will help us identify the unknown trade routes which were there in the ancient or medieval times. Like this is, I have a classic example I will tell you. 1001 stepwell which we have mapped is actually the largest stepwell in Konkan. The photos are there in the next slide, which you will be able to see. Now my question to the local person, my friend Akshay Pawar, he found out this stepwell. He knows about this stepwell from last 8 years. We recently mapped this stepwell. What he asked me was that, Rohan, out of your 1,000 stepwells map, tell me which was the biggest stepwell you found. I said that there are a couple of stepwells, like Ganesh Guha is there, and like another 2-3 stepwells are there, which are quite deep, approx about 45-50 steps must be there. But then I told him that this width of the stepwells while entering the stepwell and while going till the well shaft is just 5 to 6 feet. I told him, just tell me what is the width of this stepwell, basically the entrance till the well shaft. Then he said that the width is approximately 12 feet, which was quite huge. And then he showed me the video as well. It was quite deep. I can easily say that this is the largest stepwell in Konkan. But my question to him was that here, if you see the circle, this is Dabur Port. The almost around the 13th century, Dabur Port was in a boom. This is the Vashishta river, which goes up till Khed on the left hand side and Chiplun on the right hand side. So this were again Khed and Chiplun also were the medieval times ports, basically. So my question was to him, like, why this stepwell was built at this location itself, and why not at Dabur or Chiplun or Khed? So some study should be done over here. I would request and I would suggest the historians to come forward, the ethnologists to come forward and study why the stepwell was being built here itself. And if you see on the right hand side where I'm pointing, there's yellow star mark is there. There is a way down there. Now a road is being built, but if I screen the 10-15 years Google Earth images, there was a Kacha road. So there must be some importance why the stepwell is being built here. Now this is the stepwell. There are two huge arcs, 1 and 2. There is two Devya, what we call that, on the left hand side and the right hand side, and these two icons are there, carved out of the rocks, carved from the rocks basically. And this is either a lion or a tiger. So what I mean to say, I did not find this type of stepwell, this type of icons, this type of devra and other stepwells of Konkan region specifically. So the study is going on as far as as and when the lockdown gets over, and post rainy season, a team of historians or team of Indologists and even the archaeologists, state archaeology team will be going there to even maybe study the features of the stepwells. And the last part is the Maharashtra Stepwell Festival. This is a unique thing which we are planning to do, is that hundreds or like 150 to 200 stepwells across Maharashtra will be lit up on the same night next year on the day of Mahashivratri. I have already received huge support from across Maharashtra. On the day of Gudi Padwa, that is 13th April this year, 2020, I had the consent of 100 people across different villages that they will clean their stepwells a week before and they will light up their respective village stepwells in this manner. But then that could not happen due to sudden lockdown in Maharashtra and due to rising coronavirus cases. Next year, depending upon the coronavirus situation, we'll gauge what we'll gauge how the situation is next year, and then 150 to 200 stepwells across Maharashtra will be lit up. Now, this first stepwell and the third stepwell on the day of Mahashivratri this year, some 7-8 stepwells were lit up in Parbhani area and Aurangabad area. And I'm already in touch with the people who had initiated this. They are helping me with the stepwell campaign from the Marathwada side. This stepwell was lit up on the day of Subedar Mallarao Holkar's Jayanti. The stepwell is down the taluka. My friend took the initiative on the Maharashtra Stepwells campaign, and then he cleaned he and his friends, that group basically cleaned the stepwell and then lit them up with candles. Then one of my friends from Ahmednagar area, he's from the Shivdurga trekkers. He came forward and celebrated Holi in a very different manner by lighting up the stepwell at Shrigonda Taluka. The stepwell is in front of Bhandgaon temple, Bhandgaon village, Bhandeshwar temple basically. He lit up the stepwell. They entirely cleaned up the well shaft basically first, and then they lighted up this stepwell with diyas and decorated them with flowers and rangoli. So this has never happened earlier in any state of India. If we do this, we will directly get highlighted on the international level. And this needs to be done for promoting stepwells at a higher level. So what will happen is that in the month of March, if we decide to go ahead next year, 15 days earlier, just 7 days earlier, approx about 150 to 200 stepwells across Maharashtra will be cleaned up as well, parallelly to that. And as we move ahead with this stepwell Mahotsav year by year, many people will come forward, and this number of stepwells will keep on increasing. There will be a huge participation across Maharashtra. So let's join hands together to revive our valuable stepwells, our rich heritage basically. So that's all. I have explained end to end what this campaign is. So going forward, it will be the biggest stepwell campaign in Maharashtra. Thanks again for this wonderful opportunity. Hello. Hello.
Rahul sir. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Rohan.
Yeah. Rohan sir, thank you for the good presentation, and definitely all the peoples from the Indian Waterwork Association Aurangabad Center will support this campaign and definitely try to actively participate in these particular activity.
Sure.
Over
Thanks,
to Rahul sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Rohan sir, you have explained very perfectly the things which are available for the opportunity related to the stepwells, and a wonderful presentation it was. I request Sada sir for the vote of thanks for today's webinar. Sada sir. Okay, maybe he is not connected. Fine. I will do the vote of thanks. Thank you, thank you, sir, for wonderful work which you have highlighted related to conservation of the wells, and even Vihangra sir for highlighting the water quality work and his expertise. I thank you both the speaker for accepting our invitation on the behalf of Indian Work Association, Aurangabad Center. I thanks Dr. Sadhgir, Dr. Kulkarni sir, and all the members who have directly, indirectly made this webinar successful. Thank you all. With the permission of the chair, I declare that session is over. Sir, shall we end?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.